Hello and welcome to another edition of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with my soon-to-be in Madison, Wisconsin co-host Teos Abadia. Hey, Teos.
Hey,
How's it
I
going?
can't. It's here. The week is here. I can't believe it. We're going to Game Hole. It's gonna be awesome. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
And I had a moment this weekend that I think
yeah.
you would particularly appreciate.
Mhm.
You develop a reputation amongst your friends. So the mom of a friend of my son's calls me and says, "I need help." My youngest is going to join their D&D club. You need to help them. I'm like, sure.
Tutoring? So you're basically tutoring.
For D&D, yeah.
Yeah,
And so they came over and we
yeah,
spent
yeah.
a couple hours together, first reviewing what D&D is all about, which they had played once before. So they had a pretty good grasp, but I think I was just helping sort of smooth that, that feeling of competence around it and what the game's all about. And then they were like, "Can you help me make a character?" And I was like, "Let's go. Let's do this." So we made a druid.
Let's do this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they had the starter set, which doesn't have the druid, but they wanted to play a druid. So I'm like, well, here's the player's handbook. Let's go through this, and we had a blast. But it was that reminder of like, wow, this game is surprisingly complicated when you're new, right? Like, there's
Mhm.
a lot. Like making a character is no sim. One does not simple walk into making a character. It's like you, yeah,
No.
yeah, it's wild.
And then try to do it with 5 players or 6
Mhm.
players all at once who are even less familiar with the game and explain the different parts to them
Yeah,
while you're doing it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not an easy thing, which
yeah.
is why I always say a basic version of the game would not be bad.
Not bad at all. And my son said, like, just use D&D Beyond. And I was like, well, I kind of want, because I want him to learn the game. Like, I wanted to do it on paper. And the thing is, you get into D&D Beyond, and there's so many options and choices from so many different books that itself can be
Yep.
really overwhelming. So I told him, I said, there are lots of other books there, and you may want to later revamp your character and use other whatevers. And people you play with may be like, you should have gone with blah.
Mhm.
Just, we're going to make a core book character, so you
Yep.
understand the
Yep.
foundation of the options in the game, and we did that, and it was fun. It shocked
Awesome.
no one when he chose criminal as his background.
It is a good background. Lots of
Popular.
good stuff there, mechanically, and lots of good role playing. So speaking of criminals, we have a lot of listeners out there. And so we like to take questions and comments from them. And we sort of didn't get to a lot of them last week because we had Alex Kammer talking about Gamehole Con. So we are going to get to a few more this week, starting with the Mathemagician via our Patreon Discord. This question is inspired by why don't they make short modules anymore, which we answered previously. So, Mathemagician's question is: we learned recently that classes are content, and it was said by a designer at Wizards of the Coast. Do you see a near future now that Wizards owns D&D Beyond of selling new classes on that platform without an associated hardcover adventure? Would it then make sense to collect them into a hard copy anthology at a later date? And what about subclasses? Would any content work this way? And then the Mathemagician answers their own question by saying, well, they want D&D to be a brand. A piecemeal approach will not make a lot of sense to them because it will cost managerial time for something that isn't a coherent part of their bigger themes. They've resisted adding new classes, so that would be unlikely. Subclasses may be slightly more likely to be sold online, but would not be picked up in an anthology because folks are not going to want to spend more on, quote, old content. Uh,
So I think that I'm stepping
I,
down as host, and Mathemagician gets the job.
yeah. I've
Good.
got
Good
something
answer.
to say, but it's not terribly profound. So if you have anything to add there, Teos.
I mean, I think that the answer that Mathemagician provided is really very good. That overall, the emphasis is don't get distracted by things that are perfectly great for a role playing game to do. Any other role playing game company, the idea of like releasing a package of subclasses or even classes could make a lot of sense, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be part of a big adventure or a big setting book or anything like that. The way we saw that recent monster book, right? That's just kind of a PDF that's out there that if you think about it long term, will probably get lost into the ether, right? Years from now, someone will be saying, like, well, back in 5e, there was this fairy monster thing. I don't know. I don't think it was ever a PDF. It'll just get lost, right? But that's not the real focus. While they may play around with that and they may at times get distracted from their goal and create little one offs like that, in general, I think they are better off focused on big brand motives, right? They want things like Tyranny of Dragons, things that when somebody says the word, lots of gamers and people go, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Right? Tomb of Annihilation. "Oh yeah, I remember that." And that's the goal really. They may get distracted, they may forget their own goals, but that's what they want.
Mhm. While I hate this idea of grouping generations into Generation X and the silent generation and all this, because there are different types of people with different generations. Uh, we do see trends as
Mhm.
time passes. And one of those trends is how and why and where people will spend money. And if Wizards of the Coast is starting to learn, I'm not saying this is true, I'm just giving this as a possible example, that people are more likely to buy something for $1 17 times online than spend $17 to buy one thing online. Wouldn't they be smarter to
Mhm.
sell things online $1 at a time 17 times
Yeah.
to get 17 different subclasses as opposed to this one book, which is going to cost more to make? And so I don't know, but I'm hoping from a business perspective that they're keeping track of these things. And if it turns out that it is better for them and it does spread the game more to do something like sell things digitally, individually, piecemeal, then that they would do that because
Yeah.
that's what people are voting for with the money that they spent.
It's possible, right? I mean, one of the interesting things is looking at like Roll20. Their store is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but folks who sell on there don't report amazing sales, right? The sales there are reported from fellow creators as being really slow. And Drive Through is same company but bigger, right? And why is that, right? And there hasn't been that shift. And I think a good question is if you had a virtual tabletop and people were actually using it and love the 3D format and all of that, those are all big ifs, then maybe all that monetization could happen around selling things many different ways. And that's where you can have your cake and eat it too. You could make Tomb of Annihilation at this big, broad level, but also sell the parts of it on D&D Beyond as they already do today, sell the parts of it on the virtual tabletop and give you the 3D model with the glowing axe and the whatever things and all kinds of little things like that that people might very well enjoy doing the way they do digital dice today. All of that is possible, but a lot of things have to line up for it to really be substantial. And I think it's a very open question as to whether any of that will come our way.
Good. Next question from Silicius via the Patreon Discord. When writing might be the cheapest part of books, why don't they write bigger books? And we had this discussion before about art layout often costing more than creating the text. Well, the answer is because if you make bigger books, then you also have to do things other than writing because people won't buy books, generally speaking, that are all text.
Yeah.
So you make 100,000 more words, you have to create 100 more pieces of art to make the book work for people who prefer art in their books. So it doesn't actually save you anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really it. It's that the organization of it is complicated, and I just was part of a Jeff Stevens project, which is a fantastic project, and but just doing my little part of it and knowing that, well, Jeff's got to go look at my weapon and think through it, read it, adjust it, and all of that, and has to do that for all the contributors. That's a lot of work, and so having more magic items is more work. It really is, even though it might not be a huge dollar cost. It's someone's time. It's the how do you organize it? How do you make it useful? Bigger books become harder. So I think that actually why we see them going to a larger font size, yeah, sure, readability is fine, but also it's because they were creating a lot of content for a low price point. And even though that writing's cheap, everything else about it is expensive. The printing is expensive. So fewer pages, that is a huge win. Fewer words, huge win. And that's the direction they'd love to head in.
Mhm. For sure. We have a question from Kurt Ugle via YouTube. Do you find yourself reskinning the hell out of adventure modules and settings to flesh out plots and NPCs? If so, could you please share the method to your madness? For me, reskinning wildly cut down on issues of prep time and writer's block. My main supplements to it are adding more art, a picture being worth 1,000 words, for portraits, settings, and maps. I get really inspired and develop deeper and more sensible plots, fuller NPCs that are more connected to the story and setting, and more interesting sets of pieces and loot, and more interesting set pieces and loot.
Mm.
What do you think, Teos?
Yeah, I mean, I love reskinning. I love using a published adventure for several reasons. One is that I love learning from others. Because I'm in the business of writing adventures, I want to be in the business of reading adventures and enjoying them and learning from them, and especially from the best people out there that can make great things. You know, there are times when I read something by Will Doyle or Chris Perkins, and I think, yep, I still have plenty of work to do in my craft. Like, I am nowhere near the top where my game could be. And so this is a way to do it. And I'll take an adventure and, like, Tomb of Annihilation, I took the idea, there's this sort of throwaway idea of like this sunken city. And I'm like, cool. And there are these pirates. And I just start thinking to myself, this is a neat area that I can flesh out of telling the story of the pirates and relating them to this idea of this sunken city and what's down there. And then taking elements of what the characters have in their stories and connecting to it. So one character didn't know who their god was, right? That was part of their hook. So, what if the answer is down below, or a possible answer? I can float, if you will, an answer to them and see whether they like it. And if they like it, then, well, now we've found answers to who your god is. And so, just I love doing things like that because you have the foundation of this established adventure, but you can just run in the direction that it makes sense. And then the hardest part for me is to just put a little circle around it. Say, okay, I am now done with that, right? That is the part that I've customized, but I still need to at some point end this campaign. So I've got to move on. I can't just endlessly add to it because we'll never finish. How about you, Shawn?
Yeah. I mean, Teos and I came up in the industry through organized play mostly. And so we were, whatever we did before, DMing wise, running adventures, creating content, we then had to rethink the way we handle it because we had to present it in an organized play context.
Yeah.
So we had to get used to running things more as they were written. And when you could make tweaks, you made the tweaks as subtle as possible to keep the experience that the players were having on par with every other table that was running it.
Yeah.
But then we also are still DMs for home games. And so learning to do it one way and learning then to, all right, I have to run this as it's written, minor tweaks based on the play styles of the players. But now that I'm taking it to a home game where I can do whatever I want, what are some things that I would do? And so running adventures in one setting for one type of group and then in another setting for another type of group really helps you see the breadth of play experiences that you can create using this exact same content. And that sort of helps you once you then also learn play styles of groups and of players, really tailor content to the smallest degree and to the widest degree, where I'm just going to use this full adventure as a very rough blueprint for the actual campaign I'm going to run, which I did with Acquisitions Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
After writing it to run a certain way, when I ran it, I changed a lot of things around, and enjoyed doing that as an experiment of sort of DMing on the fly.
Yeah, awesome. Agreed. And I find that to
Yep.
be a really wonderful way to play the game, to take something that someone has created and reskin and change, and sometimes it's just like when you read an adventure and you think, for my group, I need a little something else. Like I remember I ran an Adventurers League, Storm King's Thunder sort of ice thing, and I added a little piece about interacting with a merchant to get sort of cold weather gear. But that created a really nice role-playing foundation that really helped us have a better session from there on out. And it was just riffing and adding off of what was there in a very throwaway intro to make it more substantial. And then I knew, well, it's still a 4-hour slot, so I've got to compress elsewhere, right, to make up for this time. But in the end, it was well worth doing because it was more fun for everybody that way.
Yep. So I hope that helps, Kurt. And final question coming to us via YouTube from Daniel Wong. I would love to hear more about tropes and concepts driving dungeon creation or adventure design. Any thoughts on solo role-playing games? Are you familiar with the board game Warhammer Quest from 1995, which has random dungeons ending with objective rooms, then tables of event for between dungeon delves? I am not familiar with that board game. I am familiar or have become familiar with other board games of that ilk, one of which Teos writes for. So I think they're fun. Yes, he is going to hold up his little addition here to the game, which is out now and available, I believe. Yep. But we'll talk about that later. Yeah, so there's so much to talk about with tropes driving dungeon creation or concepts for adventure design. The main thing that I try to get across when I talk about these concepts interacting is you have two things going on when you are creating an adventure or a dungeon. You have the world in which this takes place, and you have an experience that you want the players to have as they interact with those things. And you have to constantly keep in mind as you're working on one or the other that these two need to interact in some way. So you don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole of creating this perfect dungeon without stopping at several points along the way and thinking, are the players going to have fun interacting with this dungeon? If you put 72 rooms in and 60 of them are empty because that's more realistic, you are probably not going to serve the players as well as a dungeon that had 12 rooms and every single one of them have something fun to interact with. So that's, if I could just in a minute and a half give one piece of advice, that's the piece of advice I would give.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thought, that when you look at those older tropes, especially when we're talking about old tropes, that sort of idea of play that feels like a board game or a card game, and you can look at One Deck Dungeon, and you can look at HeroQuest, and you can look at the Ravenloft board game and the Chardalon and that whole series, right? There's a lot of this sort of just the mechanics of move X, enter room, deal with the threat, which may be a trap or a monster or a treasure, or and that sort of repetitive thing. It's super pleasing and it's fun. And there is something to be learned about how fun just those elements are, right? Just like a choose your own adventure book can be super fun and occupied hours of our time. But when we play a role-playing game, we usually want more than those pieces. It's not just adding those things together. It's not a choose your own adventure book plus a Chardalon board game. It is many more things. And so the more that you can tie into that, I think in today's game, will generally create a better experience, unless you're deliberately going for a retro style or something like that, then that's fine. But with all the understanding that may be, for some folks, a thing they want to dabble into and not stay in too long.
So thank you there, Daniel, for that question. And thank you all for listening. And you can always contact us via the various places that we are, and we'll talk about all of those at the end of the show. So let's get into our news and commentary section, starting with Baldman Games looking for volunteers for PAX Unplugged. Yes, we are just a week away, Teos and I, or actually like 3 days away from from Gamehole Con, but PAX Unplugged is on the horizon, and it is not a small show in its own right. And Baldman Games runs the official D&D stuff happening there. And so they are looking for volunteers to help set up, help break down, to run games, and so on. The setup and the convention start on November 30th. That's a Thursday. And the convention runs Friday, December 1st through Sunday, December 3rd. If you are running games there, you can run 3 slots. So that's 3 4-hour sessions and get a full show badge, which is a great deal. And if you run 5 slots for the show, you can get a spot in a free hotel room, which is, again, for that convention, with the way the setup is there in Philadelphia, not a bad deal at all. So there are 3 slots on Friday and Saturday and 2 slots on Sunday. What's running there? What is Baldman Games running, and what might you be running if you volunteer? They have a D&D demo, which is 15 to 20 minutes, that runs in the main hall upstairs between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. And that's just a quick one encounter. This is what D&D is. This is how the dice work. This is how your character works. There's an intro to D&D game that also runs in the main hall upstairs, and that goes from 90 minutes to 2 hours. That's an intro to D&D. So you would run it twice if you run a 4-hour slot. What else is happening? They're running Planescape Turn of Fortune's Wheel. That is the adventure, the Planescape adventure in the hardcover. They are running chapter 1 from that adventure with 3rd or 4th level Planescape characters able to play. They're also running a Planescape Epic 4-hour event for 3rd or 4th level characters. Wow. And they're also running classic adventures to kick off the 50th anniversary celebration of D&D a bit early. They are running the Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan and Tomb of Horrors as a 5th edition game. So all of those things are there to play if you're going, or if you want to volunteer, you could get a free badge, free room, and get to share the love of D&D. There's nothing official announced about an AL campaign for Planescape. So as far as we know right now, these are just one-offs.
Right.
And you can find all of that at baldmangames.com. And I'll link in the show notes. What else do you have going on, Teos?
Well, how about a job that may be a dream job for a lot of folks? Wizards of the Coast is hiring the D&D lead narrative designer. And this is tied to digital experiences, which may be of interest to folks even who don't want to be employed. There's this new job posting is about working with the game director to build the future of D&D's digital play experience. And I'll quote what it says here. In this role, you will plan, detail, and supervise the creation of digital experiences for all types of players, while also aligning with the business and design goals of the product. You will be an advocate for our audience and the design ethos of the studio, cultivating the connective tissue between our digital adventures and other parts of the D&D ecosystem, including books, TV, games, and more. Most of all, we need someone comfortable collaborating in real time with other designers, artists, programmers, and product managers to deliver the highest quality results. And with that awesome sounding description is a salary ranging from $104,000 to $176,000 US dollars. Not bad at all.
No, interesting to note.
And and I like that the description kind of ties into all the things we often talk about on this show, right? That like D&D is not this one thing, it's the connection of all of those. And so this is a job posting that really seems to speak to that, right? It's kind of cool.
For sure. So we go from the real world to the big bad villain world. Gnome Stew has 5 strategies for creating unforgettable big bad villains. This blog by Shane Dayton on the well-loved and long-lasting blog Gnome Stew is a great read, providing excellent ideas on how to create believable and fun villains. What did you think of this article, Teos?
It's really cool. I'm not going to spoil all of it, but a couple of the points are treat big bads like PCs. ask why, what the villain motivation is, and to think through in a couple of different ways what your villain is up to and why they're doing this cool sounding evil thing. And then
Mhm.
some ideas on a motivational twist. And those first 3 points I thought were some of my favorites that are made in this article, but I really encourage reading it. It's the kind of thing that I go, yeah, I know how to make good villains. And then I read the article and I go, oh yeah, these are good ideas. This is a good this is a good blog. This is one to bookmark, favorite, save as PDF kind of thing. Some very nice thoughts there.
There you go. And now we get to some creator and crowdfunding news, starting with James Haeck launching his own YouTube channel. The first two videos are up covering how all DMs are game designers, and then various useful tips and thoughts related to this. James has been on the show, I believe, a great game designer, and you can learn a lot from James Haeck.
Yeah, and his second video, I didn't write in the show notes here, but his second video I just finished watching is about different types of games. So it really ties into some of the coverage you've done here on Mastering Dungeons. And he particularly uses Fantasy Flight games to talk about how the dice are different and why they're different and the kind of narrative he does. And he's hilarious because he covers a campaign where a DM called George runs a game for a player, Mark, who wants to run a farm boy, and a guy, Harrison, who wants to run a kind of scoundrel type character. And then he uses the dice and their outcomes of the Fantasy Flight game's kind of weird symbol dice and talks through, how those result in the story of the first movie. And it's very entertaining. He does a really good job of making his point about how dice drive action and why you don't just use a D20 for RPGs.
There you go. And HeroQuest is releasing some new thing, Teos. I'm sure you don't know much about this, so we can just, oh wait, you've got a copy. You must know the creator.
Somewhere, if you could zoom in, like right here or there, you could find my name on the box. I'm so excited to see this. It's gorgeous. This really like shiny foil for this HeroQuest. So when HeroQuest was rebooted, relaunched, it did it as a crowdfunding exercise, and that was really cool. Except that the expansion that I wrote and another expansion someone else wrote. There were three of us that wrote expansions. All of those were only available if you bought the like big mythic level crowdfunding tier. Well, they're now releasing some of these out there. So Spirit Queen's Torment is out now as its own quest pack, and I got a contributor copy, which I'm really thankful for. And you can order that. It's out now. You can order it via the Hasbro site and other stores as well, because it's available out there, which is really just wild that I could possibly see this in a gaming store. I think it's really fun. When I wrote this, I really had the charter was to make orcs interesting and different in the HeroQuest world, because they've traditionally been fodder that you just tear apart, as we talked about tropes.
Right.
Beat up on those orcs, right? And so I wrote a story about who the orcs have really been historically in the HeroQuest world, which was really a lot of fun to do and kind of put a
Nice.
different spin on them.
We need to play HeroQuest at GameholeCon, because I have the box, but I just haven't found the people to play yet.
If you'll bring it, I'll run it. It's a little large to port around, but there must be a game
I don't
library
even know.
or something.
I might have to. Yeah, the game library might have.
So
That'd be
I would
great.
totally play some here. I'll bring this game if you will. If we can find, I could run this if we have the expansion, if the base set. So.
If I rent a trailer, I could put it on the back just to bring the HeroQuest game.
Yeah. I love it. It's a lot of fun. It is really fun, quick play.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. We have art from Tony DiTerlizzi called The Pen and Ink Drawings of Tony DiTerlizzi. This artist is from the original Planescape and author of Wundla and Spiderwick Chronicles. Tony has a new book collecting sketches from across his career. It's at stewartngbooks.com. 128 pages for $30 signed.
Yeah, I bought mine this morning. I own a couple of Tony's sketchbooks from the Wandla series of books, which I really like. I think he also has some for Spiderwick Chronicles. I love just those kind of sketches that he does, and he has in this book, he has lots of D&D Planescape art and other art of these sort of sketches, line drawings that are just so creative and fantastic. I find they're a great way to cleanse your brain and get ideas by just looking at art like this. So highly encouraged. Just $30. Great.
Yeah, nice. We have Hellwatch, Infernal Oath, which is a 5e campaign and setting from Lion Banner Games. They've already funded this, and it is about infernal forces cursing a land where heroes are needed to break the curse in this dark fantasy campaign. And there's a free sample PDF. What do you know about this, Teos?
I was fortunate to talk to Andrea Aloisi. Sorry, Andrea, who did additional game design on this project. And one of the things that you and I often talk about that warms our old hearts is being able to talk to folks who reach out to us and say, "Hey, thanks for the podcast. I have a question about the industry. How does this work? How should I approach this thing?" And this was one of those cases. And so it was really cool to exchange ideas with Andrea and then see the awesome design he did. His monsters have some really cool, they're my kind of monsters, meaty with a lot to do, really creative, interactive ideas where you feel what the monster is doing. It's not just swinging and hitting, it's doing really interesting things. And so great to see the project doing well. Congrats to Andrea and the team at Lion Banner Games.
And last but not least, we have a project called Nimble, Streamlining Your 5e Game. This comes to us from another creator, Evan Diaz. And the concept is speeding up 5e combat while increasing the interesting and meaningful choices for both the players and the DM. Many of the core rules are streamlined, or they have variants that streamline it to help you streamline your game, as the title so ably tells us. You can download a sample PDF to look, and this is on Kickstarter.com. It's only $4 for the PDF, and you have until November 10th to back it, and a link is in our show notes to their Kickstarter.
Yeah, and thanks to Evan for the kind words about our efforts. This is another case where it was fun to just hear about their ideas. And we often come up with the idea of like home rules, home brewing some things, fixing things, areas of the game. So this is a really nice, for just $4, you can get lots of ideas on how to streamline 5e. Well recommended.